What if the reason you cannot fall asleep at peace is because deep down you know you have been negotiating with your own potential, betraying it quietly day after day, and calling that compromise life? Listen carefully now, because this is not a story meant to entertain you. It is not here to excite you, impress you, or flood you with borrowed motivation. It is here to confront you while your guard is lowering, while the conscious mind loosens its grip, while the door to the deeper chambers of thought slowly opens. This is where success is either planted or permanently denied. This is where Napoleon Hill always worked, whether he said it plainly or not. He did not build success on noise. He built it on inner law, invisible structure, and the quiet, relentless discipline of thought. As your body settles and your breathing slows, understand this first truth. Success is not something you chase in the outer world. It is something you authorize internally. Every external condition you experience is a downstream effect of decisions you either made consciously or avoided making altogether. There is no randomness here. There is no injustice in the mechanics of achievement. There is only law, and law does not negotiate with excuses. Most people drift into sleep the same way they drift through life, without direction, without intention, without control. Their thoughts wander. Their emotions roam freely. Their imagination works against them instead of for them. And then they wonder why years pass and nothing changes. Napoleon Hill called this drifting. He understood that drifting is not neutral. It is destructive. A drifting mind is an unguarded mind, and an unguarded mind becomes occupied by fear, doubt, suggestion, and inherited limitation. You are not here to drift tonight. As your eyelids grow heavy, let the idea sink deeper that your mind is the only thing you truly own. Not your job, not your circumstances, not your past, not even your body in the long run. Your mind is the command center. Hill taught that whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve, but very few people ever stop to examine what they are consistently conceiving or what they have silently agreed to believe. You were not born lacking confidence. You were conditioned into hesitation. You were not born without purpose. You were trained to ignore it. You were not born fearing failure. You were taught to associate effort with pain, judgment, and loss. These ideas were not proven to you. They were suggested. And suggestion, repeated enough times, becomes belief. Belief hardens into identity. Identity dictates behavior. Behavior manufactures results. This is the invisible chain Hill spent his life trying to expose. As sleep approaches, this is the moment to reverse the chain. Definiteness of purpose is not a goal written on paper. It is a decision burned into the subconscious. It is the refusal to allow your mind to wander aimlessly from one desire to another. Hill understood that the human mind cannot serve two masters. Either you command it with purpose, or it will obey the strongest outside influence available. Most people allow society, family expectations, fear of criticism, and past failure to define their direction. They never consciously choose. And because they never choose, they never arrive. Your mind right now is highly impressionable. This is not mystical. It is neurological and psychological. As conscious resistance fades, suggestion moves freely. This is why Hill emphasized autosuggestion. Not affirmations repeated mechanically, but emotionally charged, purposeful impressions impressed upon the subconscious with repetition and feeling. Autosuggestion is how you reclaim authorship of your inner narrative. Understand this clearly. Your subconscious does not argue. It accepts. It does not analyze. It executes. It does not reason. It obeys. Whatever you consistently feed it, it multiplies. Fear multiplies fear. Doubt multiplies delay. Indecision multiplies chaos. But desire, when definite and emotionally charged, multiplies opportunity, awareness, persistence, and courage. Burning desire is not wishful thinking. It is obsession refined by discipline. Hill observed that every great achievement, without exception, began as an idea held with such intensity that it displaced fear. Desire becomes burning when it is no longer dependent on mood, environment, or approval. It becomes part of your identity. You do not hope for it. You expect it. You do not wait for permission. You prepare for inevitability. As you sink deeper into rest, imagine what it would feel like to move through life without internal contradiction, to want something and not secretly sabotage it with doubt, to decide and not retreat when resistance appears, to persist not because it is easy, but because stopping is no longer an option you entertain. Hill knew that persistence is not heroic effort. It is mental loyalty to a decision. Most people quit not because they are incapable, but because their decision was never final. They left themselves an escape route. They allowed the possibility of retreat to remain psychologically open. The mind, sensing that escape, never fully commits its resources. Nature does not respond to half commitment. Life does not reward hesitation. The subconscious does not mobilize power until it senses certainty. Faith, as Hill described it, is not religious belief. It is confidence in the unseen mechanics of cause and effect. It is knowing that disciplined thought, emotionally reinforced, must produce results, even if the method is not yet visible. Faith is developed, not found. It is built through repeated instruction to the subconscious, paired with action that reinforces identity. You do not wait to feel confident before acting. You act in alignment long enough that confidence becomes inevitable. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is an indicator. It reveals where your mind has accepted limitation as truth. Hill taught fear mastery, not fear elimination. Fear disappears when it is replaced with understanding. Fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of failure, fear of loss of love, fear of illness, fear of death. These are not threats. They are mental habits, and habits can be dismantled. As your breathing slows, feel this truth settle in. Every fear you have ever experienced was imagined before it was felt. The body reacted to a picture painted by the mind. Change the picture and the reaction changes. This is the power of imagination, the most misunderstood and misused faculty of the human mind. Most people allow imagination to run wild at night, replaying failures, inventing disasters, rehearsing defeat. Hill taught that imagination must be directed with discipline, or it will betray you. Your imagination is the drafting table of reality. What you repeatedly visualize with emotion becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes comfortable. What becomes comfortable becomes normal. And what becomes normal eventually becomes real. This is not superstition. It is conditioning. It is rehearsal. It is mental training. Decision is the blade that cuts through chaos. Hill noticed that successful people decide quickly and change slowly, if at all. Unsuccessful people hesitate, overanalyze, and defer responsibility. Indecision drains energy. It fragments focus. It invites doubt. When you cannot decide, you invite outside voices to decide for you. And those voices rarely have your destiny in mind. Tonight, as consciousness softens, the mind becomes receptive to authority. Be careful whose authority you allow. Hill warned that the opinions of others, when accepted without examination, become mental prisons. Most people are imprisoned by advice from those who never escaped mediocrity themselves. The subconscious does not know the difference between wisdom and noise. It only knows repetition and emotion. Self-discipline is not punishment. It is protection. It is the ability to direct your mental and emotional energy instead of leaking it into impulse, distraction, and reaction. Hill understood that the disciplined mind sleeps peacefully because it is not at war with itself. Guilt, regret, and anxiety are symptoms of internal disorder, not external circumstance. As sleep deepens, allow this idea to take root. You are not tired because life is hard. You are tired because your mind has been unmanaged. You have been thinking without intention, reacting without strategy, and desiring without commitment. Order restores energy. Purpose restores vitality. Direction restores peace. There are invisible forces at work in your life right now, not mystical forces, but psychological ones. The law of habit, the law of suggestion, the law of emotional association, the law of persistence. These laws operate whether you acknowledge them or not. Hill's genius was not in inventing these laws, but in observing them honestly and naming them without comfort. As you drift further, let go of the belief that success belongs to others. That lie was planted. It was repeated. It was reinforced. But it was never proven. The mind accepts what it is told when it is not guarded. Tonight you are reclaiming that ground. Success is not loud. It is quiet. It is built in the hours no one sees, in thoughts no one hears, in decisions no one applauds. It is forged when you choose. Discipline over impulse, clarity over comfort, purpose over approval. Hill knew that greatness is not a gift. It is a demand placed upon the self and honored daily. You do not need more information. You need internal alignment. You do not need more time. You need more decisiveness. You do not need permission. You need responsibility. The moment you accept full responsibility for your mental state, your emotional reactions, and your persistent direction, life responds differently. Not instantly, but inevitably. As sleep takes you now, allow these ideas to bypass resistance and settle where habits are formed. Let the drifting mind become a directed one. Let desire sharpen. Let fear dissolve into understanding. Let purpose solidify. The work has already begun, not tomorrow, not later, but now, in this quiet moment where the subconscious listens most attentively. And as you fall asleep, remember this above all else: you are not preparing to become someone new. You are dismantling everything that taught you to forget who you already are. As the mind descends further into quiet, another layer reveals itself, one most people never reach because they fall asleep too quickly, or they wake themselves with restless thought. This layer is where beliefs stop pretending and show their true weight. It is here that you begin to feel the accumulated pressure of every decision postponed, every desire diluted, every moment you sensed your own potential and chose distraction instead. Napoleon Hill understood this pressure. He recognized it as unused power turning inward, becoming anxiety, frustration, and silent resentment toward life itself. You may have noticed that exhaustion is not always physical. Often it is mental fatigue disguised as tiredness. It is the weariness that comes from wanting two opposing things at the same time: comfort and greatness, safety and expansion, val and sovereignty. The mind cannot resolve contradictions without cost. It burns energy trying to reconcile what cannot coexist. Hill taught that peace only comes after decision, after a clear internal alignment where desire, belief, and action no longer fight one another. Listen to this carefully. As your consciousness softens further, your results are loyal to your dominant thoughts, not your occasional intentions. The mind does not respond to what you wish once or twice. It responds to what you dwell on, emotionally, persistently, and repeatedly. This is why Hill insisted that success is psychological before it is material. You can work tirelessly and still fail if your inner dialogue is disorganized, fearful, or divided. Most people do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they lack mental consistency. One day they believe, the next they doubt. One moment they feel certain, the next they retreat. The subconscious cannot build momentum under these conditions. It requires continuity. It requires a steady signal. It requires that you mean what you think and think what you mean. Autosuggestion was Hill's most misunderstood principle because people tried to turn it into slogans instead of structure. Autosuggestion is not positive thinking layered over negative belief. That is mental noise. Autosuggestion is the deliberate, repeated instruction of the subconscious with emotionally charged directives aligned with a definite purpose. It is not something you do casually. It is something you practice with discipline, often in moments like this, when the analytical mind is quiet and the deeper faculties are receptive. Your subconscious is forming conclusions about you every day. It is deciding what you deserve, what you can handle, what you are capable of sustaining. These conclusions were shaped long before you became aware of them. Childhood experience, authority figures, emotional memories, repeated failures interpreted incorrectly. All of these left impressions. Hill never blamed environment, but he never denied its influence either. He simply refused to allow influence to become destiny. As you move deeper into sleep, consider this: every belief you hold about yourself was learned, and anything learned can be unlearned or replaced. The subconscious does not cling to truth. It clings to familiarity. This is why change feels uncomfortable, not because it is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. The mind interprets unfamiliarity as danger. Hill taught that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite the mind's resistance to change. Burning desire must be protected. Left exposed, it weakens under criticism, delay, and comparison. Most people talk themselves out of their own ambitions before the world ever has the chance. They imagine rejection. They rehearse embarrassment. They pre-experience failure and call it realism. Hill called this self-sabotage by imagination misused. Imagination can be destructive or constructive, but it is never neutral. It is always building something. Tonight, it is building patterns. The images you allow now will influence how you feel tomorrow, how you decide next week, how you persist next year. Hill knew that repetition during relaxed states was one of the fastest ways to alter inner patterns. This is why moments before sleep are so powerful. The subconscious is listening without arguing. You may notice thoughts arising that try to pull you back into old narratives, memories of mistakes, voices of doubt, questions about worthiness. This is resistance, not failure. Resistance is evidence that the mind is being challenged. Hill observed that whenever a person begins to reclaim control of thought, the old patterns resist eviction. They fight for survival. Let him surface without engaging them. Awareness weakens them. Attention starves them. Persistence, as Hill defined it, is not endless effort. It is sustained belief in the face of delayed results. Most people quit during the invisible phase when progress has not yet materialized externally. They mistake silence for rejection. They assume nothing is happening because nothing is visible. But internal construction always precedes external manifestation. The subconscious must accept a reality before life can reflect it. Think of the mind as soil. Seeds do not sprout the moment they are planted. They require time, darkness, and consistency. Digging them up to check their progress only disrupts the process. Hill warned against impatience not because time matters, but because doubt destroys momentum. Faith is simply patience fortified by understanding. Self-discipline becomes essential here. Without it, emotions dictate behavior. With it, purpose governs emotion. Hill understood that discipline is not suppression. It is direction. You do not eliminate desire, you harness it. You do not deny emotion, you regulate it. The undisciplined mind reacts. The disciplined mind responds. As you drift deeper, let this settle. No one ever drifts into success. Drift leads to mediocrity because it requires no thought, no courage, no ownership. Hill identified drifting as the enemy of definiteness. A drifting person waits for circumstances to decide for them. A directed person decides first and allows circumstances to reorganize accordingly. Decision is not just choosing what you want. It is choosing what you will no longer tolerate. It is the internal line drawn that signals to the subconscious that ambiguity has ended. Hill noticed that once a decision is final, the mind begins to notice opportunities that were previously invisible. This is not coincidence. It is selective attention guided by purpose. Fear loses power when named. Fear thrives in vagueness. When you bring clarity to what you fear, it shrinks. Hill taught that fear is sustained by ignorance, uncertainty, and negative suggestion. Replace ignorance with knowledge. Replace uncertainty with decision. Replace negative suggestion with conscious autosuggestion. The structure collapses. You are not here tonight to escape life. You are here to reorganize your relationship with it. Sleep is not avoidance. It is integration. It is where the mind files experiences, reinforces patterns, and prepares tomorrow's perceptions. Hill understood that what you carry into sleep, you carry into your future. As your body becomes heavier and the outer world fades, allow a new assumption to take root quietly, that you are capable of sustained focus, disciplined thought, and long-term persistence. Do not argue with it. Let it settle. The subconscious does not need proof in the moment. It needs repetition and emotional neutrality. Certainty grows later. The invisible mental forces Hill spoke of are not mystical. They are psychological laws operating consistently. The law of habit ensures that repeated thought becomes automatic. The law of emotional association ensures that thoughts paired with feeling become powerful. The law of expectancy ensures that what you anticipate influences how you act. These forces shape destiny silently, patiently, without concern for intention, unless intention is reinforced. Tonight, intention is being reinforced. As you move closer to sleep, understand that you are not being changed. You are being reminded that control begins internally, that responsibility is power, not burden, that discipline is freedom in disguise, That purpose is not discovered externally but claimed internally. Let the mind rest now, not in emptiness but in quiet direction. The work continue. Beneath awareness, patterns are shifting. Associations are loosening. New internal instructions are being accepted. This is how reprogramming actually happens. Not through force, but through consistent, deliberate influence at moments when the mind is most open. You do not need to stay awake for this. In fact, sleep will carry it further. Let go. Drift, but not aimlessly. Drift with direction. Drift into alignment. Drift into the quiet certainty that success is not something you chase tomorrow, but something you authorize tonight, internally, silently, and without compromise. There is a point in the descent into sleep where time loses its sharp edges, where the mind no longer tracks minutes or consequences. And in that softened state, the deeper architecture of identity begins to speak. This is where truths you have avoided rise without accusation, and where the internal voice you tried to drown with noise finally has the space to be heard. Napoleon Hill understood that this voice is not mystical or prophetic. It is the accumulation of thought habits, emotional patterns, and repeated decisions solidified into expectation. It is the silent governor of your life. Most people never meet this governor consciously. They feel its effects without understanding its origin. They call it luck. They call it fate. They call it circumstance. Hill rejected all of these labels because they remove responsibility. He saw clearly that the mind, when left untrained, becomes a patchwork of borrowed beliefs and inherited fears, and that patchwork determines the ceiling of achievement long before effort ever begins. As your awareness sinks deeper, consider this with honesty. How often have you acted in contradiction to what you claim to want? Not because you were incapable, but because your internal identity had not yet accepted the version of you required to achieve it. The subconscious. IOUs will not support behavior that threatens its current self-image. This is why people self-sabotage at the edge of progress. Success requires identity expansion, and identity resists expansion until it feels safe. Hill taught that the mind must be prepared for success the same way the body must be prepared for physical strain. Sudden success collapses the untrained mind just as sudden weight crushes an untrained body. This is why many people unconsciously avoid opportunity. It threatens the familiar emotional equilibrium, even if that equilibrium is uncomfortable. The mind prefers known pain to unknown possibility. Imagination, when disciplined, becomes the bridge between the current self and the expanded self. Hill did not encourage fantasy. He encouraged rehearsal. Mental rehearsal is how the subconscious becomes familiar with a new identity. When an experience is rehearsed with emotion, the subconscious begins to treat it as real. Neural pathways strengthen. Emotional responses normalize. Resistance weakens. This is why athletes visualize performance. This is why leaders rehearse conversations. This is why Hill insisted that the mind must see and feel success before it can sustain it. You cannot act confidently in a situation your subconscious has never experienced, even symbolically. Fear is simply unfamiliarity amplified by emotion. As you sink further, allow yourself to imagine, not extravagantly, not desperately, but calmly with discipline. Imagine yourself acting with certainty where you once hesitated, speaking clearly where you once deferred, persisting where you once withdrew, not as a fantasy, but as a rehearsal. The subconscious does not need drama. It needs repetition. Burning desire deepens here. It moves beyond emotion and becomes orientation. Desire at this level is no longer excitement. It is direction. It is the quiet knowing of where you are, going, even when the path is unclear. Hill observed that this form of desire does not shout. It does not demand validation. It operates beneath mood, beneath circumstance, beneath opinion. Faith grows in this quiet space. Not blind faith, but informed trust in process. Hill believed that faith is the result of understanding cause and effect at the psychological level. When you understand that thought influences action, action influences habit, habit influences character, and character influences destiny, faith becomes logical. You trust the process because you understand the mechanics. Fear begins to lose its emotional charge here. Not because it disappears, but because it is no longer interpreted as a stop signal, it becomes information. Hill taught that fear often appears at the threshold of growth. It is not warning you of danger, but of transition. The mind resists change because change threatens identity. When you understand this, fear becomes a marker, not an obstacle. Persistence must be internalized at this level, or it will collapse under pressure. Persistence is not stubbornness. It is not force. It is identity loyalty. When persistence is rooted in who you believe yourself to be, quitting becomes incongruent. Hill noticed that people who persist do not ask whether they should continue. That question never arises. They ask how to continue. This is the difference between effort and commitment. Effort negotiates. Commitment decides. Most people live in effort, constantly recalculating whether the cost is still acceptable. Hill observed that success belongs to those who decide the cost in advance and pay it without constant reconsideration. As your mind drifts deeper into sleep, you may feel a strange calm mixed with intensity. This is alignment beginning to form. Alignment does not feel euphoric. It feels stable. It feels grounded. It feels inevitable. The noise of internal conflict quiets because there is less contradiction. Desire, belief, and direction begin to point the same way. Self-discipline becomes almost effortless in this state because it is no longer enforced. It is expressed. When your identity supports your goals, discipline feels natural. When it does not, discipline feels like punishment. Hill emphasized this distinction because he saw too many people exhaust themselves trying to control behavior without addressing belief. The subconscious rewards consistency. Every time you think in alignment with your purpose, you reinforce the neural pathways that support it. Every time you act in alignment, you deepen those pathways. Over time, alignment becomes default. This is how reprogramming becomes permanent. Decision sharpens further here. Decisions made in calm certainty carry more power than decisions made in emotional intensity. Hill warned against impulsive decisions fueled by frustration or desperation. Those decisions collapse under pressure because they are not rooted deeply enough. The decisions that reshape destiny are quiet, firm, and internally complete. You may notice now that thoughts feel slower, heavier, more deliberate. This is not drowsiness alone. It is the conscious mind releasing control. In this state, the subconscious integrates new instructions without resistance. Hill understood that repetition in this state creates deep change because the critical faculty is relaxed. Allow the idea to settle that you are capable of long-term focus, that you can hold a vision without constant reinforcement from the outside, that you can persist without immediate reward. Do not test this idea. Do not challenge it. Let it exist without argument. The invisible forces continue their work. Expectancy shapes perception. Habit shapes reaction. Belief shapes endurance. Hill spent decades observing these forces in action across thousands of lives. He did not romanticize them. He respected them. Law does not care how you feel. It only responds to consistency. As sleep deepens, understand this. Tomorrow's behavior will be influenced by tonight's internal state, not dramatically, subtly. You will notice slightly more patience, slightly more clarity, slightly less emotional reactivity. These small shifts compound. Hill knew that transformation rarely announces itself. It accumulates quietly. You are not being asked to become perfect. Perfection is not required. Consistency is, direction is, ownership is. The mind does not need heroics, it needs clarity. Rest now in this understanding. Let the mind continue its quiet reorganization. Let old patterns loosen without force. Let new patterns form without urgency. This is not a moment of striving, it is a moment of alignment. Sleep is not escape, it is preparation. And as you surrender to it now, you are not surrendering control. You are exercising it at the deepest level, where thought becomes destiny and identity becomes action without effort. As the body moves deeper into stillness and the boundary between waking and sleep thins, the mind enters a state where it no longer argues for its limitations. This is where the old defenses weaken, not because they have been defeated, but because they are no longer being fed. Napoleon Hill understood that most limitations survive not because they are true, but because they are rehearsed. Rehearsal gives them strength. Silence starves them. In this depth, you may feel a sense of distance from your usual concerns. Problems that once felt urgent now seem abstract, almost unreal. This is not avoidance, it is perspective. When the emotional charge is removed, the mind can see structure instead of chaos. Hill believed that clarity emerges when emotion is regulated, not suppressed. Onal mastery is not coldness, it is precision. Here, the idea of responsibility takes on a different meaning. Responsibility is no longer blame or burden, it is leverage. When you accept that your inner world is the primary cause of your outer experience, you gain the ability to change outcomes at the source. Hill never promised ease. He promised control. Control over thought, over emotional reaction, over persistent direction. Most people unconsciously outsource this control. They allow moods to dictate effort. They allow circumstances to justify retreat. They allow opinions to shape self-image. And then they wonder why their lives feel fragmented. A fragmented mind produces fragmented results. Hill observed that unity of purpose creates coherence, and coherence produces momentum. As sleep deepens, allow the concept of unity to settle. Unity between what you desire and what you believe you deserve. Unity between what you plan and what you do. Unity between who you are privately and who you present publicly. Inner division is exhausting. Alignment restores energy. Self-discipline at this level is not about forcing behavior. It is about removing contradiction. When the mind is aligned, discipline feels like relief. You are no longer negotiating with yourself. You are no longer dragging one part of your mind forward while another resists. Hill understood that the highest form of discipline is clarity. Clarity dissolves procrastination. Procrastination is not laziness, it is emotional avoidance. It is the mind's attempt to delay discomfort caused by uncertainty, fear of judgment, or fear of inadequacy. When purpose is definite, procrastination loses its justification. There is nothing to debate. Action becomes a natural next step. Imagination continues its quiet work here, but now it is less visual and more conceptual. You begin to feel what it would be like to live without constant self-doubt. Not excitement, not thrill, but steadiness. Hill recognized that steadiness is the true indicator of power. Emotional highs fade. Emotional lows destabilize. Steadiness endures. Faith matures in this stillness. It is no longer dependent on affirmation or reassurance. It becomes an internal posture, a way of standing mentally in the face of uncertainty. Hill taught that uncertainty is not a flaw in the process, it is a feature. If outcomes were guaranteed immediately, persistence would be unnecessary and character would never develop. Character in Hill's philosophy is not morality, it is reliability. The ability to rely on yourself to follow through on decisions even when motivation fades, even when progress slows, even when no one is watching. This reliability is built quietly through repeated acts of integrity with your own word. As you rest deeper, consider how often you have broken promises to yourself without consequence. Promises to start, promises to continue, promises to focus. Each broken promise subtly weakens self-trust. Hill warned that self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Without it, belief cannot stabilize. Tonight, self-trust is being rebuilt, not through grand vows, but through subtle reconditioning, through the acceptance of a new assumption, that when you decide, you follow through, that when you commit, you persist, that your word to yourself carries weight. Fear mastery deepens here. Fear loses its drama and becomes data. You begin to sense that fear often signals importance, not danger. The things that matter most provoke the strongest internal resistance because they threaten to change identity. Hill understood that growth always involves a period of discomfort, not because something is wrong, but because something is expanding. Persistence at this level becomes quiet endurance, not aggressive, not tense, simply present. You stop asking how long it will take. You stop measuring progress emotionally. You continue because stopping no longer aligns with who you are becoming. Hill observed that when persistence reaches this point, success becomes a matter of time, not chance. Decision solidifies further. Decisions made here are not emotional reactions. They are structural commitments. You are not deciding what you feel like doing. You are deciding who you are. Identity-based decisions carry immense power because they govern behavior automatically. Hill saw this in every enduring success story he studied. As sleep deepens further, you may notice the sense of trying dissolve. Trying implies uncertainty. It implies contingency. In its place emerges a quiet resolve. Resolve does not strain. It holds. It does not demand proof. It allows time to do its work. The invisible mental forces continue shaping perception beneath awareness. Selective attention begins to reorganize. You will notice opportunities that align with your direction more readily. You will notice distractions more clearly. This is not coincidence. It is mental filtering guided by purpose. Hill often spoke of the mastermind principle, the idea that aligned minds amplify power. But he also knew that the first mastermind must be internal. Your thoughts must cooperate instead of compete. When inner conflict ends, outer cooperation begins to appear naturally. As you sink further, allow this internal cooperation to deepen. Let thoughts slow. Let emotional reactions soften. Let the sense of urgency dissolve into certainty. Urgency is fear-driven. Certainty is direction-driven. Rest in this state. There is nothing you need to fix right now, nothing you need to solve. The work being done is foundational. It is structural. It is not meant to be felt dramatically. It is meant to last. Hill knew that lasting. Change happens quietly, beneath awareness, reinforced through repetition and consistency. Tonight is one of those reinforcements, not the only one, but an important one. As sleep takes you further now, carry this with you. You are not at the mercy of circumstance. You are at the mercy of your own unmanaged mind. And the moment you begin to manage it, patiently, deliberately, persistently, circumstance begins to reorganize around you. Let go now. Let the mind continue its work without supervision. Trust the process you are building internally. This is not the end of effort. It is the beginning of control. There comes a depth of rest where the mind no longer separates thought from feeling, where identity is no longer something you describe, but something you inhabit. In this space, you are not thinking about change. You are becoming receptive to it. Napoleon Hill understood that this was the level at which real transformation occurred, not through conscious force, but through subconscious acceptance. The outer world changes only after the inner world stops resisting its own evolution. At this depth, you may feel as though you are observing yourself from a distance. This distance is not detachment from life, but detachment from habit. Habit is what keeps identity rigid. When habit loosens, identity becomes flexible. Hill observed that flexibility of identity is what allows a person to rise beyond inherited limitations. You cannot outperform the version of yourself you insist on remaining loyal to. Most people are loyal to an outdated self-image. They cling to who they have been because it feels safe, even when it is painful. The mind prefers a familiar struggle to an unfamiliar victory. This is why so many people unconsciously sabotage progress just before a breakthrough. Hill never framed this as weakness. He framed it as conditioning. And conditioning can be altered. D. As you rest here, notice how little effort is required to simply exist. Breathing happens. The heart maintains its rhythm. Systems operate without conscious management. Hill believed this was evidence of a deeper intelligence within the mind, one that functions optimally when not interfered with by fear and doubt. This intelligence is not something you create. It is something you align with. Alignment requires trust. Trust not in chance, but in cause and effect. When you repeatedly direct thought toward a definite purpose, when you regulate emotional reaction instead of indulging it, when you persist beyond the urge to retreat, the mind reorganizes itself. Neural pathways strengthen. Emotional responses recalibrate. Perception sharpens. This is not philosophy, it is conditioning. Burning desire at this level no longer feels like intensity. It feels like gravity. You are pulled toward your purpose without force. The question of whether you will continue no longer arises. Hill saw this shift in every individual who moved from struggle to momentum. Desire stopped being something they had to ignite and became something they had to honor. Honor is an important word here. To honor your desire is to stop betraying it through delay, distraction, and self-negotiation. Hill believed that self-respect was inseparable from success. You cannot achieve at a high level while quietly disrespecting your own intentions. Every time you delay what you know you must do, you reinforce the identity of someone who does not follow through. As sleep deepens, a new identity begins to feel less foreign. The identity of someone who acts without waiting for certainty, who persists without needing constant reassurance, who understands that doubt is not a signal to stop, but a signal to strengthen focus. This identity does not feel heroic. It feels steady. It feels grounded. Faith becomes almost invisible here because it is no longer something you consciously practice. It is embedded in how you interpret events. Setbacks no longer feel personal. Delays no longer feel final. Obstacles no longer feel hostile. They become part of the process. Hill emphasized that interpretation determines endurance. Two people can experience the same obstacle and emerge with entirely different trajectories based on how they assign meaning. Meaning is programmable, not instantly but persistently. When you consistently interpret difficulty as training rather than punishment, the emotional response changes. When the emotional response changes, behavior changes. When behavior changes, outcomes change. Hill saw this pattern repeat endlessly among those who succeeded long-term. Fear continues to dissolve here, not because it vanishes, but because it is no longer central. It becomes background noise rather than a commanding voice. The mind learns that fear does not predict outcome. It only reflects unfamiliarity. And unfamiliarity fades with exposure and repetition. Persistence becomes automatic when resistance loses its emotional charge. You no longer feel like you are pushing uphill. You feel like you are walking forward, even if the terrain is uneven. Hill noted that this is when people stop asking for motivation. They no longer need it. Motivation is required only when identity and behavior are misaligned. Self-discipline now feels less like control and more like coherence. Thoughts support actions. Actions reinforce beliefs. Beliefs stabilize identity. This loop feeds itself. Hill understood that once this loop is established, progress accelerates naturally. Decision at this depth is no longer reactive. You are not deciding in response to pressure or discomfort. You are deciding from principle. Principle-based decisions do not fluctuate with emotion. They hold. Why Hill emphasized definiteness of purpose so strongly. Purpose becomes the organizing principle around which all decisions align. As your mind rests deeper, you may notice a quiet confidence emerging. Not excitement, not optimism. Confidence without noise. This confidence does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It simply exists. Hill saw this quiet confidence in every individual who mastered themselves before attempting to master circumstances. The invisible mental forces continue their work uninterrupted. Expectancy subtly shifts. You begin to expect progress, not miracles. Movement, not perfection. Growth, not ease. These expectations shape how you notice opportunities and respond to challenges. The mind begins to cooperate with your direction instead of undermining it. Hill often warned that impatience is the greatest enemy of persistence. Impatience is a lack of trust in process. It demands proof before commitment. At this depth, impatience softens because understanding has replaced urgency. You are no longer trying to force results. You are building inevitability. Inevitability does not mean ease. It means direction without reversal. Hill knew that success often arrives quietly after long periods of internal preparation. Those who quit early never see this moment. Those who persist often describe success as sudden, not realizing how long it was being constructed beneath awareness. As sleep deepens further, allow yourself to release the need to monitor progress. Monitoring invites doubt. Trust invites endurance. You are not surrendering responsibility. You are delegating execution to the deeper mind that operates best without interference. There is nothing you need to repeat consciously now. No phrases, no commands. The impressions have already been made. The subconscious has been given clear direction through repetition, tone, and emotion. Neutrality. This is how lasting change is installed. Rest in this state. Let the mind integrate. Let the identity continue to expand quietly. Tomorrow you will not wake up transformed. You will wake up slightly more aligned, slightly more decisive, slightly less reactive. These subtle shifts compound. Hill built his entire philosophy on this truth. Transformation is not dramatic, it is cumulative. And tonight, another layer has been added. As the deepest layer of rest settles in, there is a moment where the mind stands completely exposed to itself, stripped of excuses, stripped of stories, stripped of the comforting illusion that tomorrow will somehow be different without a decision made now. This is the moment Napoleon Hill spent his life pointing toward without dramatizing it. This is the moment where responsibility can no longer be deferred, where truth does not argue, where the inner self either claims authority or surrenders it. In this depth, you are no longer rehearsing ideas. You are confronting ownership, not ownership of outcomes, but ownership of direction. Hill understood that most people want the rewards of success without accepting the psychological burden of command. Command over thought, command over emotion, command over persistence. Without this command, desire remains passive and life remains reactive. You may feel an unusual stillness now, almost heavy, almost final. This is not exhaustion, this is gravity. This is the weight of realizing that no external force has been holding you back as long as your own unmanaged mind. Hill never softened this truth, because softening it would weaken it. Once you see that your results are loyal to your dominant thoughts, you cannot unsee it. Once you accept that indecision is a decision, drifting is a choice, and delay is self-betrayal, you are no longer innocent. You are responsible. Responsibility, WH, and fully accepted, does not feel oppressive. It feels clarifying. It removes confusion. It eliminates negotiation. You stop asking why things happened and start asking what you will do next. Hill observed that this shift is where personal power is born, not in hope, not in wishing, but in the quiet internal statement, "This is mine to direct." At this level, definiteness of purpose is no longer an idea you admire. It is a line you draw internally, a refusal to continue living fragmented, a refusal to let emotion override decision, a refusal to let fear masquerade as caution. Hill knew that a definite purpose reorganizes the mind automatically. When purpose is clear, distractions lose their pull, opinions lose their authority, excuses lose their comfort. Burning desire now reveals its final form. It is no longer emotional fire, it is resolve. Resolve is desire that has passed through doubt and remained intact. It is desire that no longer seeks validation. It is desire that has accepted the cost and moved forward anyway. Hill recognized that only this level of desire survives time, criticism, and uncertainty. Faith now becomes loyalty to your own word, not optimism, not blind belief. Loyalty to the decision you made when clarity was present. Loyalty when motivation fades. Loyalty when progress slows. Loyalty when no one sees the effort. Hill saw that this loyalty separates those who dream from those who build. Autosuggestion has already done its work, not through repetition alone, but through consistency of message. The subconscious has been told calmly and repeatedly that you are capable of discipline, persistence, and direction. It has accepted this not as fantasy, but as instruction. From this point forward, thought patterns will begin to self-correct. Emotional reactions will soften faster. Focus will return more quickly after distraction. This is not magic. This is conditioning completing its cycle. Fear now stands exposed for what it always was, a test of identity. Fear asks one question only: will you return to who you were, or will you move forward as who you are becoming? Hill understood that fear never disappears entirely because growth never ends, but fear loses authority the moment it is no longer obeyed. Imagination, now fully disciplined, no longer runs wild. It works quietly, constructing expectation, rehearsing competence, reinforcing identity. You will notice yourself imagining success without effort, without excitement, without urgency, just assumption. Hill knew that assumption is the final stage of belief. What you assume, you act upon without resistance. Decision is now complete, not because everything is clear, but because clarity is no longer required to move. You have accepted that certainty comes after commitment, not before it. Hill emphasized this relentlessly because most people wait for emotional readiness that never arrives. Readiness is built by action, not granted by feeling. Persistence is no longer something you force. It is something you default to. Quitting no longer feels like relief. It feels like betrayal. This is the turning point Hill saw again and again. When stopping becomes more uncomfortable than continuing, momentum becomes inevitable. Self-discipline has reached its highest form. It is no longer restraint. It is alignment. You are not resisting impulse. You are no longer divided enough to feel it strongly. The mind and purpose are cooperating. Energy that was once wasted on inner conflict is now available for creation. The invisible mental forces are now fully engaged. Expectancy is aligned. Habit is reorganizing. Perception is filtering reality through purpose instead of fear. Hill described this phase as the moment life begins to respond differently, not because circumstances changed, but because interpretation did. Opportunity was always present. Awareness was not. Now comes the moment that cannot be softened. You will wake up, and when you do, nothing external will announce that this night mattered. The world will look the same. The demands will still exist. Distractions will still call. Old habits will attempt to reclaim authority. This is where most people lose what they gained, not because the process failed, but because they refuse to defend the change. This is where you must decide, without drama, without delay, without negotiation, that you are done drifting, done postponing, done negotiating with fear, done waiting for permission, done breaking promises to yourself, done living below the level of your own understanding. You must decide that your mind is no longer an unmanaged environment, that your thoughts will be directed, that your emotions will be regulated, that your purpose will be honored, that your persistence will not depend on mood, that your life will no longer be shaped by what you tolerate. This is not a moment for inspiration. This is a moment for commitment. Commitment to think deliberately. Commitment to decide quickly and hold firmly. Commitment to persist when results are delayed. Commitment to master fear instead of obeying it. Commitment to discipline not as punishment, but as freedom. Commitment to total responsibility for who you become. Napoleon Hill did not promise comfort. He promised power, but only to those willing to assume command of their inner world. So when you wake, do not ask how you feel. Ask what you have decided. Do not wait to be motivated. Act in alignment. Do not look for evidence. Become the evidence. Do not drift. Direct. This is the line. This is the moment. This is the demand. Take full responsibility for your life. Choose your purpose. Commit to it without retreat. And begin now, not tomorrow, not later, not someday, but with the very next thought you allow, the very next decision you make, and the very next action you take. Your mind is listening. Your future is waiting. And from this moment forward, there are no excuses left to hide behind.